Okay, so today I'm doing an analytical stream about the far right and about a tweet specifically that I made, which went semi-viral of sorts. Perhaps not as massively blown up as you may have seen before, but certainly for me, a relatively small account on the internet, it's been pretty successful. Um, it's got, I'll show you now, 4,000 likes or so. Um, Yeah, no, it's doing great in my opinion. Um, 4,143 likes as of the present. And I wanted to have a look at some responses to it because I think it raises some interesting points about what I was saying and about the far right and political scene in general, and just the sort of ideas that have been perpetuated a lot in politics at the moment. So, firstly, a little introduction on the stream itself, sorry, the tweet itself. So, essentially, a video was being shared by lots of far right and supposedly alt right and reactionary groups across social media. So, you saw in the video a car being shaken and windows being smashed by a group of people who were being claimed to be Muslim. Um, but then, on closer analysis of the video, a few things turned out to be false about it. So, for instance, the location of this video was claimed to be Birmingham, but if you look at the video, the car is driving on the right side of the road, which means that it can't possibly be Birmingham because in the UK we drive on the left. It turns out that this video was filmed in Switzerland. The people who are attacking the car aren't Muslims, but are fans of the football club Basel, obviously a city in Switzerland. And they, I think, lost a game to a rival team, and thus their fans started smashing up, cars and stuff. Obviously not great, but it has nothing to do with Muslims. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the supposed invasion of British culture that the far right often perpetuate, which means that the entire purpose of this narrative being pushed by the far right was not to inform people, but to lie to people, to try and smear them as, the problem in the UK. And obviously, subsequently, lots of people fell for that. You saw across not just Twitter, but Facebook and other social media platforms, people, genuinely being concerned by a false story, the idea that Muslims are literally going around destroying cars, and being savage, horrible people, when in reality it's got nothing to do with them. But people were being fooled by that, and you gotta realize that the far right are a deceitful, insidious, corruptive, manipulative movement that do not care about the truth and about facts. Quite obviously, they're fascists. They don't have any interest in the facts. They have interest in furthering their own power and position in society. And one of the ways to do so is by lying about many different groups in society, which is the point of the tweet I made. Because Muslims were the target in this particular incident, but at the same time, the far right lie about many other people as well. So, I've listed a few of them here. We've got queer people, immigrants, black people, feminism, or feminists, I should say, but feminism as well. Socialists left off the list here. You've got Jewish people, you've got the disabled. There's loads of other groups which can easily be targeted by the far right and easily have lies about them spread because of just the ease the far right manipulate people with. That's sort of what I'm saying very basically here, that the far right should never be taken at face value because their rhetoric is almost always comprised of lies. And if it's not lying about something, it's distorting the truth to make it look like things are worse than they are. So taking a single statistic and then presenting it in a false or corrupted way to perpetuate their narrative, taking the truth and distorting it or outright lying, as they've done here, it's always something you have to be wary of and often, dismissive of, because these people do not have any interest in the truth. They're interested in fascism and any means they can get there through. And one such way is demonizing the people they want to attack, because the far right, it doesn't matter if they're lying to many, because by the time you have the truth put out there, too many people have heard the narrative that, oh, the Muslims are doing these bad things, when in reality, they had nothing to do with it. It wasn't even in the UK where this supposedly took place. And subsequently, the damage is done. However, what I want to focus on isn't necessarily my tweet as such, but some of the responses, because a tweet that generates a lot of likes, as this one has done, thankfully, is going to get some responses. So we've got 38 replies directly, but not all of them are ones that I necessarily agreed with. So if we scroll down, hopefully we're going to have a look at a few of these and see what sort of thing they are, what sort of content has been left underneath. I've not taken an in-depth look at many of the stuff. Like, I liked it. I liked the first few replies when it was still a small number of people who'd liked it. But I've not looked at all of them. So hopefully it should be first time seeing it for both of us. Okay, so the first one, is a mutual of mine, which I've liked, saying, yeah, it's not real, but it could be, which is a satirical look at the sort of thing that gets said a lot by the far right and by fascist sympathizers in response to this sort of thing. So after they've spread the lie, when it's shown in their face to be a complete mistruth, instead of saying, yeah, or we lied, they say, oh, well, we're only warning you about what could happen, or some other distorted version of the reply that they should be giving to save face. So the idea that Muslims haven't taken over isn't met with, oh, well, perhaps this talk of invasion is complete farce. Instead, they say, oh, well, it will be what will happen if we continue allowing the things we don't want to happen. So the idea that, oh, if there's more non-white people, if there's more non-Christian people in the country, we'll see these things happen. I mean, never mind that football hooliganism is something that happens in the UK, regardless of the ethnicity of the people doing it or the religion of the people doing it. It's something that the far right like to push. So this excellent post from this user is essentially saying, yeah, it's these fascists often will just if it's not true, let's say it will be true, which is obviously worth nothing because it's just them scaremongering about society, which is why I believe I liked it. But here we go. Here's where I think the next sort of real contention starts. This person responds to my tweet with two questions. One, do you consider everyone who would vote Republican to be far right? And two, can you confirm that this is a fake news story? If so, where did this footage come from, and where was it taken, and who, if not Muslims during Ramadan, are attacking these cars? Now, we can answer both these questions, but it firstly highlights something of the sort of person who responds to a fairly mundane, simplistic tweet by myself about the far right, essentially just saying, oh, well, they're not good people, they lie a lot, with this sort of response. So, the first question, do you consider everyone who would vote Republican to be far right? I never even mentioned the Republicans in this. I never even mentioned anything to do with American politics. I just mentioned, the broad term, the far right, in relation to an example of the far right lying. On this topic, though, the fact that so many people are, more afraid of the label of being called far right, the idea that, oh, I don't want to be called far right for voting for, Republicans and right-wing or far-right parties, then, the actions of the far right, the consequences of far-right policies, the ideas of fascism being implemented in society, the fact that so much precedent is put on just the label of it is alarming. It's how fascists often manipulate these people into doing their bidding. The fear of being labeled bad contributes to these people siding with other like-minded people into sort of doing the bidding of the far right, and subsequently becoming an unintentional pawn of fascist actors. So to answer this person's question, obviously not everyone who votes Republican is far right. However, it is important to analyze the party and say, yes, there are some clear fascist tendencies within the Republican Party. We can see this, right now with the government curtailing workers' rights and massively deregulating the economy and ramping up police and military spending and enforcement and stuff, and all the common tenets of fascism, like the authoritarian streak seen in this government and the ramping up of the militant side of capitalism. But the fact that it's a non-sequitur that just comes out of nowhere from a comment that had nothing to do with it sort of suggests the insecurity that many of these people have, really. And then the second question, can you confirm this is a fake news story? It literally, the tweet I quote tweeted is literally a video explaining the situation where the fact that Muslims were blamed for this by so many people is a complete lie, because it's football fans after a local derby who lost the game and started smashing up cars in Switzerland. If this person just clicked on the link, which is right there in front of them, I can just do it now. It all plays. Literally, it's only like a minute 17. And instead, this person has essentially posed it as, oh, it's not entirely true. Is it fake news? Is it not? When there's no need for that, because you could have just easily found out themselves if they'd just bothered to click the link right in front of them. And it's another element of how fascists have such an easier job spreading their stuff. They don't need to show people their stuff and their evidence. They can just say something, make it sound inflammatory, and people will just sort of buy into it. And this person may not have bought and completely believe the original story, but rather than ask them, where's your proof? Where's your evidence? How can I believe this? The question is posed onto the people demonstrating that it's false and cautious of the far right's lies by saying, "Oh, can you confirm it's fake news?" And sort of presenting it as, if not the Muslims, then who? As it says here, if so, where did this footage come from, and when was it taken, and who, if not Muslims, are attacking these cars? So, if it's not a far right, if it's not Muslims, then who could it possibly be? And that's pretty problematic. That's not helpful. Imagine you're a Muslim who is seeing this and thinking, oh well, why am I having to defend myself against accusations with no basis in reality? I don't know these people. This isn't even in my country, yet I'm being demonized as this problem. And people who should know better are essentially just taking their side by being apathetic and sort of placing the impetus on us to act and to prove it's not us. It's a guilty until proven innocent in a way. So yeah, it's alarming seeing people have this mindset with things, because if you've got people unwilling to do basic research in stuff and basic question asking of these people, of these fascists, then what does it mean for their targets? Especially when it's literally just right in front of you. Like if they had just spent like a second clicking there, and just doing a little bit more than just sitting and being all, oh, I'm going to ask you questions I could easily find out myself. It would just save people time and stop fascists from having such an easy ride. Which is, again, why I say the far right should never be taken at face value, because you shouldn't be assuming that their words have any sort of substance to them, because like with this story, it's usually blatant lies. Now, there's 3 responses to this tweet. It sadly appears as though one of these conversations is a little bit distorted. I'm not sure how I would fix it. But yeah, it's someone going into the sort of criticism of the Republican Party. And, it's Republicans at the moment, and for most of history, in fact, have been a far-right party, have been firmly on the side of complete laissez-faire capitalism, of suppression of the workers, of authoritarian control, firmly a fascist far-right party, and it doesn't matter that people who aren't supposedly far-right vote for them. The goals of that party are far-right. I can easily describe them well onto the right-wing scale of the spectrum. And subsequently, it doesn't matter whether you're hurt by the idea that people would call the party far-right, the one you voted for. It's just a matter of fact that all their policies are on the far right of the scale. And you get all this sort of what's it called? I can't even speak properly. You get all this quibbling over stuff. I'm all about women's rights, LGBTQ rights, separation of church and state. But they voted Republican, or I might vote Republican. Like, and women's rights. What are the Republican Party doing right now with abortion rights? Are they actively trying to curtail the right of a person to get an abortion, to have control over their own body? What are they doing with LGBTQ rights, where they're allowing businesses to discriminate against the against gay people, allowing discrimination laws, protecting queer people to be removed, banning queer people from certain elements of society, letting them, not letting businesses say, no, we're not going to let queer people here, essentially facilitating the way for their further removal of their rights. It's disgraceful that this is happening. But it's coming from this Republican Party, which clearly is on the firmly regressive far right side of politics. Separation of church and state. What is Trump's administration doing right now to allow for greater religious control in society? Already, we've seen election laws disallowing religious institutions from funding political parties be, scrapped, so that the Trump administration and Republicans can get more funding from wealthy religious groups, often evangelical churches who are terrible in the aforementioned categories. These, you can't say, oh, Republicans aren't far right, and I'm all fine, whilst you're voting for a party which is actively harmful for the things you've listed. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you personally identify as a fascist. If your actions are contributing to that, can you be surprised when people describe you as far right, or people describe the parties you vote for as far right? You can't be taking umbrage with the the labels assigned to you when your actions actively benefit that far right contribution, as this person rightfully says, Maria the Witch, who you should all follow. If you're all about women's and LGBTQ rights, what are you doing voting Republican? It's obvious that you should be thinking a bit more about what you're voting for, and what you're supporting, when it's fairly obvious that the parties you vote for are harming what you want in society. Like, if this person is all about these things, then why are you voting for a party which is actively fighting against them? What do the people you vote for think of the things you pertain to support? And that's why it draws back to what I was saying about the far right. These supposedly, this guy, like, if we take his word for it, is in favor of women's rights and LGBTQ rights and all that stuff. And he's voting for people who actively oppose that, who've just told him, like, empty words and empty rhetoric about, oh, yeah, we're all for equality and we're all for this progress, but it's got to change a few things in society to make it better. And the reality is, oh, we're going to scrap protections protecting women and queer people at work. We're going to gut society of abortion rights and of LGBTQ recognition and stuff. We're going to make society regress back to a time when these things adhere to our traditionalist conservative views. So, it's another case of far right lies manipulating someone into, potentially voting for them. And the fact they say, oh, I'm not a Klansman, like, it's like, what does that even mean? Great, you're not a KKK member. Like, that's not any real badge, is it? It's not much of a step. And it ignores the fact that the far right, they evolve beyond the commonly known forms of racism we see today. But enough on this set of tweets. So there's another few here that this person said, it's like you didn't even watch a video, which is, yeah, essentially, like, they didn't watch a video at all. But let's check, see if there's any more here. Okay, so we can see that it's a person, sort of refusing to accept that, yeah, these far right sources like Breitbart, like Veritas, all these, like the Daily Mail, do spread false information and strongly narrative-led pieces about various groups in society, be they queer people, Muslims, immigrants, all that sort of stuff. And when this person says, "Oh, liberals aren't exactly known for being honest," it's like, yeah, fine. Liberal news pieces aren't the best, but are they actively spreading hateful information about people? Are they actively lying about literally every single data point in a news story to spread their hateful ideas? No. I'm not going to sit here and defend liberal newspapers and say, "Oh, they're great," but it's not the same thing at all. You know, I'm not having newspapers and news articles spread about people, who are mixed race like I am, or black like I am. When um, by liberals is by conservatives and stuff, and by the far right, as per the video that has been spread around in my tweet and stuff. And then later on, I'm having a hard time figuring out what side you're on. Liberal equivalent, Antifa, Huffington Post. Like, it's just, it's nonsense. What stuff he's going on about is nonsense. It's just, garbled rhetoric and political ideas all clumped into one. And ultimately, it's what happens when your worldview is so distorted by these fascist leaning and fascist news points, where you can't accept that these people are lying, and instead lump together media groups from anything from Antifa to sort of liberal-esque centrist pieces like Huffington Post and stuff, and CNN into one. And there's one more, just slightly aggressive, but watch the video essentially, which is pretty much what we would say. But on to the next reply. Okay, so a very typical response that you see a lot of people saying. So I've listed all these points about the far right, and then they say they are as bad as the far left. Now, this is a very common tactic of centrists, and ultimately one that helps benefit the far right because it has a complete false equivalency with two groups that aren't at all equal. So the far right and the far left are simply in some ways they're a little bit misleading titles because they simply represent the actual ends and more conclusive goals of the respective political wings. So firmly left-wing opinions stand on rejection of capitalism, socialism, worker ownership, the end of social hierarchies that are unjust and bad, like the capitalist system which extracts profit from workers to steal value for the wealthy, but seizes property as private profit-making land for corporations and the extremely wealthy, taking it from workers who would otherwise need it to survive, holding things like healthcare and food and land for profit, stopping people from having a life. That's what the far left stands for. And then the far right, is for none of that at all. It's for completely the opposite things, like the hierarchy being maintained, a social order of traditionalism, conservatism, religious fundamentalism, the suppression of the workers, using profit extraction to the full, where you take it from not only anything in society, but from the people as well. So the things I listed, like Muslims, queer people, immigrants, black people, using them as mere tools to consolidate power and extract more profit. You know, the techniques that have been seen by the Nazis, Mussolini's regime in Italy and stuff, and Pinochet in Chile, they are what the far right are, fascists. The ideas of the KKK, and white nationalists and stuff, and like the BNP and stuff, that's far right. They're completely different to the far left in but ideology, in tactics, in language and rhetoric. It's completely different. Yet these people, these centrists who essentially just see the word far and view like the spectrum as just a you got to be in the middle to be accurate and balanced, say these sort of empty, vapid lines all the time and contribute ultimately to the far right because they draw a false equivalence to a good idea and a bad idea, or you may not agree that it's good or not, and I'll obviously disagree with you there, but ideas which are ultimately about liberation and freedom and ideas that are about authoritarianism and suppression, and compare them as the same. So, for the person who is, the side that's bad, they are being seen as legitimate, as actual, legitimate good ideas, and subsequently benefit from that. It's like, imagine if you've got two cakes and one of them's like, curtailed to be perfect, and really nice, and um, had a lot of effort put into it, and the other one's just sort of some slop thrown together with like half quality ingredients, and you like cheated a bit at the end by adding in some like mud and stuff and just coloring to make it look nicer. And then someone's like, "Oh, they're just as good as each other. They're just the same." It's like, you've been cheated. If you've put time into making that cake, the person who's thrown together some gunk and like called it a cake, they're the one who's feeling better because they have had their complete lack of work um, seen as equivalent to the actual solid work. Um, and subsequently, this equivalence of the far right and the far left only helps the far right. I mean, it also helps them because traditionally, and just as in terms of political opposition, the far left are the strongest and best opposition to the far right. They're the people who put their foot down and say, no, we're not going to tolerate fascism because it's a hateful, awful regime which makes capitalism even worse than it already is and suppresses workers and the marginalized. To maintain the power of the wealthy. Ultimately, the far left are the ones who oppose that. They recognize the far right as the culmination of capitalist ideas and ideas of hierarchy, and ultimately have the strongest opposition to that. Um, and subsequently, the far right, they're not only sort of loathing the far left, but also in fear of them. To look at what Hitler thought about the far left, he recognized them as the greatest threat. He recognized the communists and the socialists and those groups in Germany or the Weimar Republic were the strongest opposition to the far right, which is why he moved as quickly as he could to demobilize and strike down the far left, which is why the Reichstag fire got blamed on the far left. Which is why almost as soon as he could, the communists and the socialists were removed from the voting electorate. Which is why the socialists and the communists were the first people Hitler imprisoned in political camps and concentration camps and stuff. And the system of removing political enemies, because he recognised the far left were the greatest threat to the fascists, because they're the ones who stand in the street and say, no, we're going to stop that. And subsequently, this sort of argument is exactly what the fascists want, because they see the far left as their greatest threat, the ones who are actually going to stand up and say, no, we're not going to stand for this. We will fight you off the streets if you try and impose fascism. And subsequently, they use centrists, these like unwitting pawns of fascism, to do their work. And people like this, like Mr. Livewire, they are ultimately the perfect weapon, just an innocuous, seemingly, this person's probably all right, he's probably got a normal life, but he's spreading the sort of arguments that the far right need. And there were some good replies to this from memory. I remember this one got a lot of likes, but um, peak centrism, yeah, essentially, centrism, just this awful, oh, both sides are the same, like I explained just a second ago. We got a nice tweet from Drill here. I'm not sure what that's meant to be. I might be missing the joke there. What else? And yeah, like this person says, no one needs the centrist BS right now, because yeah, if you have someone in society saying this sort of stuff, oh, both sides are the same, then that's going to benefit the negative side. If you are comparing a good thing to a bad thing, or people trying to stop society from being worse to people actively trying to erase minorities and the marginalized and make capitalism even worse than it is now, it's not great. And yeah, these responses all sort of say what I was saying, in that, well, obviously you refute words, but that you can't compare two things like that when the far left and the far right have fundamentally different ideas. But this sort of naive, tiresome centrism is what ultimately aids the far right. You'll also notice that these people believe like ideas about socialism and communism that are often spread about the far right. So you see people say, "Oh, it killed so many people. Oh, it's worse than Nazism and stuff," which are often directly thought of by fascists who come up with these lies and ideas and mistruths and misappropriations, to ultimately discredit their greatest enemies. Anyway, on to our next post. Okay, so this one's all right. The far right doesn't seem to have anything but lies to support their racist positions on anything. Apparently, thumping the Bible they never read isn't enough anymore. And yeah, I agree with most of this. They do have I mean, the thing is, it's not as though they don't seem to have anything but lies anymore. It's that they never really had any. They never had any lies. They never had. What am I saying? Their lies. They're the only thing they had. They don't have any truthful substance to what they say. And if they were to say the truth in their rhetoric, they'd be very easy to sort of hold, because they'd literally just be saying stuff like, "Oh, we want minorities gone. We want workers to have essentially no rights. We want to maximize your suppression so that we can maintain powerful and wealthy." So if they were going to tell the truth, that's what they'd be saying. And subsequently, these people, when someone says, "Oh, they don't have anything but lies anymore," it implies that there's any truthful substance to it anyway. So yeah, no, I do agree with what they're trying to say, but I feel as if the wording could be a little bit better. This guy, the Expanse fans, the far right and the far left are just two sides of the same loony coin. So obviously ignoring the ableism they put with loony, because obviously it's good to cut down on our ableist slurs and stuff. It's similar to what was said above. Just the idea that these two fundamentally different ideas are somehow the same just because of a poorly understood political spectrum that you think, oh well, it's both sides are wrong. People who have this view ultimately, not only do they play into the fascist sort of ideas about the world, but also, they're just not thinking. They're not thinking a lot about just ideas in general. You can't just say, "Oh, I've got no opinions, so I'm the correct one," or "I'm in the middle, so I'm right." No, there's sometimes ideas are good and bad, and you have to be, as a mature adult, able to say, "No, this idea is wrong. This idea is bad." And we need to recognize that, yes, sometimes you've got to be radical to bring about positive change. And ultimately, just have this immature sort of naive view of just going into it, oh, left and right are bad and the best is in the middle, only helps people who are on the side of that injustice, on the right, on the far right and stuff. So yeah, this view is not only really naive and really illiterate politically, but just unhelpful and contributes to the far right and their lies. Mr. MR says, anyone not being lied about? Yeah, and yeah, it's very true. These people don't have any limits to who they're going to lie about, because they're fascists. Like I said earlier, they don't care about the truth. They care about maintaining their capital and their profit and suppressing whichever group they can to work this out, to work out how they're going to get their power. So yeah, no, it's quite sad. Just quickly, someone in the chat says, to say that people bringing up the depths under communism is a lie by the far right is just plain wrong. Now, I think you may have misunderstood my point, B. It's not that there weren't deaths under these nations. No, of course, no one's going to deny that. But the deaths were not caused by communism and are not the fault of communism. To accept that, for one, countries like the Soviet Union and Mao's China were communist is to ignore what communism is. Communism is the worker ownership of means of production, the end of social hierarchy, in the sense that we see no political class and workers having control. The end of the state and just people deciding what is going to happen for everyone else, or in these states' cases, a dictator demanding what was going to happen. Otherwise, you get sent to the gulag. That's not communism. That's not socialism. That's not a system of worker control and the end of the unfair hierarchy. That's literally continuing it and just changing the name. And to accept the idea that Stalin or Mao or Kim Jong-un has a monopoly on what socialism is to accept essentially the propaganda of a dictatorship. So when we talk about these deaths, we, absolutely, they happened. Don't get us wrong, they happened, but they're not the fault of communism. And if we are going to talk about deaths, which we should, because they, obviously it's good to talk about the suffering in the world. Let's talk about how many people die under capitalism right now, millions every year, which is far more than even the most slandered and misreported and misappropriated deaths given to communism. So yeah, when we talk about what I was saying a second ago, it's not that we deny that deaths happened in Soviet Russia and stuff. It's that we can't describe them as communist because it just wasn't communism at all, and it's really not politically accurate to describe it as such because it's not. It's not the system. It's like saying, "Oh, democracy is bad because in North Korea, Kim Jong Un is a dictator." Just because it says Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It's just sort of a dictatorship says. It's not actually based on any sort of reality. And to accept Kim Jong Un's word on what democracy is pretty silly. Anyway, back to the posts. This person, sadly, I cannot read. I believe that's Russian. Don't want to embarrass myself, but I think it's Russian. Says, same with far left in response to all of this. And, this is just not the case. Again, similar to the other ones, as I've already said a few times, the far left is not the same as the far right. So just off the bat, that's not the case. But, do the far left lie about Muslims or about queer people or about immigrants or, black people or feminism or socialism? These things that they're saying is just not accurate to what is going on in the world. If anything, the far left are people making the world better for these people, for the marginalized. If we look at where oppression is fought strongest, it's from the far left. As a black person, the people who were marching for black rights, against the state and the oppression of the ruling class and against racism were socialists and of the far left, like Martin Luther King, someone who spoke against not just racial inequality, but worker suppression and, suppression in general. And ultimately, that comes from the capitalist, system. It comes from a system of commodification and using the, racism to make more money, to invalidate the humanity of these people, and then justify extracting more profit off them, to keep their communities in poverty and not recognize their right to the basic fundamentals of human life, and thus saving money on, ensuring they have a fair life. And it's the far left overthrowing these hierarchies and these sources of oppression for worker liberation, for the liberation of human beings. And you can't take that away from the fact that the far left are doing that. So not only is it a false equivalency, it's inane to suggest that the far left are doing any of these lies about the groups in the way that is suggested here. So yeah, no, it's just complete rubbish essentially. And yeah, a few comments in response. Pantone says to Koke. Actually, is that how I pronounce it? Yeah, to Koke. Which is essentially a fallacy in which you say, oh well, you're saying this, but you're doing this as well, which means that you are wrong. So imagine you imagine someone says to you, oh, cars are bad for the environment because they produce a lot of they leave a lot of CO2 as waste product and thus pollute the air. And then you say, oh, but you drive a car, that means you're wrong. It's like, that may well be true. You may drive a car, but that's absolutely nothing to do with the argument. And subsequently, that doesn't have any relation to a logical, it's a fallacy because you're not actually addressing the argument, which is that, oh, cars produce or leave a waste product which pollutes the environment and stuff. I wouldn't actually say that this is the fallacy that's correct because it isn't actually stuff the far left are doing. So it would be that fallacy if the far left were lying about Muslims and queer people and stuff when they aren't. So it's not really a fallacy in the sense of argumentum to Koke. However, it is a wrong argument. Obviously, it's not correct. Nice simple no, that's correct. And comedic comment there from a red Chilean Off to Gulag. Okay. Next is yet another comment complaining about the two same sides. Violence is the same way, mate. Two insanes cancel each other out. So, firstly, yet more ableism from someone who I'm guessing is meant to be a centrist or something. But, it's like, it's just completely false. If you put any sort of time into understanding the far left and understanding, radical ideas about society, then you wouldn't have this opinion. If you spent time listening to them instead of listening to, say, far right influence or actual far right people about these, socialist ideas, you wouldn't be having that opinion because there's actually no comparison between the ideas of the far left and the far right. No one on the far left is saying, "Oh, let's massacre like people of minorities and of different races and ethnicities and stuff." No one's saying, "Oh, kick out all the Muslims" on the far left. No one's saying these things, so it's ludicrous to say that that's the case. And the ableism as well sort of suggests to me that these people don't have much consideration of what they're saying. Two insanes, like it's silly using these terms. And again, if they'd spent any time in far left circles, perhaps they would realize that no, not only do we oppose, the bigotry and prejudice and oppression that the system has, but we also want to um, move beyond this sort of thing. We want to move beyond just casual language, which ultimately upholds a inequality, a source of oppression, no matter how seemingly trivial. Okay, so the next one is literally just a tagging of two accounts, Education for Libs and Democrats Logic. Now, I'm neither liberal nor a Democrat, so I don't know why they tagged me here, but perhaps it speaks volumes to the sort of ideas people have about the far left when they think that um, the far left are Democrats and liberals. Um, and wow, they're pretty massive accounts, actually. But, just typical bog standard, or edgy, let's troll the libs and stuff, just rubbish. Ada Rainfall says today is Wednesday. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure how that even relates to my post. Yeah, I'm just going to move past that. I don't know what we're on about. Thomas says they just don't care. They love the outrage, and that's true. The far right don't have any interest in the truth. They need and actually actively advocate for the focus and attention they get when they are able to spread these videos. People on Facebook, the average layman saying, "Oh, Muslims are doing this. Oh, look at these Muslims destroying cars and stuff." They're people who they can indoctrinate and ultimately win over by spreading around these lies about them. Um, and not just Muslims, but other groups that I listed as well. Queer people. They can say, "Oh, well, look at all these silly identities." They're trying to indoctrinate your kids. Just the general gay scare stuff that was seen decades ago, just rebranded to today. Fitting it to a new format and spreading filth across society, like lies that spread on um, far right internet sites. Like trying to claim that gay people are trying to molest kids and stuff. Just obvious lies, but easily generate clicks and internet attention and stuff, and subsequently win over people who would otherwise know better. About immigrants. So you no doubt seen all the false statistics that are about crime rates and stuff, which upon the even slightest bit of scrutiny, turn out to be completely false and completely distorted. Sean of Sean and Jen does quite a good job of deconstructing a lot of these, but it reaches too many people, and subsequently isn't you know effectively tackled a lot of the time. So lots of people do genuinely think immigrants are causing all this crime. Um, Lies about black people. Look at all the rubbish said about Black Lives Matter, and all this crap about how supposedly BLM are trying to eliminate white people and stuff and trying to kill the whites. And it's all just nonsense. And yet so many people believe that Black Lives Matter is genuinely a black supremacist movement trying to eliminate white people from the country and stuff. And subsequently destroying what should be a movement of liberation and freedom for Black people. Feminism. Now, look, feminism is probably the biggest one. All the rubbish said about feminists on the internet is just easily documented. And so much of it starts with the far right spreading and creating false accounts, saying things that blatantly, no feminist believes, or a very small subset of ideas believe in, and just isn't the case. Um, and then obviously socialist is a big one. We already mentioned the misattributed deaths of nations to socialism, but the far right especially need to lie about this, because if they see people turning to the far left, they ultimately have more to have to combat to get to their ultimate stage in society, where they're going to have to meet more people who will actively oppose them instead of just the the what's it called? Oh, I hate it when I have a mind blank. More people who actively oppose them instead of just people who will stand by and do nothing. So yeah, going back, where were we? This person's absolutely right, Thomas. Then Camden McLaren says narrative is everything nowadays, and yeah, they're right as well. Kanye West's Haitian friend, I think that's Haiti, yeah, good. My flag knowledge is still good. Says lie about socialism, a question mark. Yeah, like I just said, socialism is a massive threat to fascism because like capitalism, fascism is about maintaining the power structure of society. It's about maintaining the capital and the private property of people who exist at the top of society today. And subsequently, these people, the far right, need to spread lies and propaganda about socialists to maintain their capital. And this isn't unique to the far right. Plenty of conservatives and capitalists, and even liberals, to be honest, say things that are blatantly false about socialism to protect their capital, to protect the system that is upholding their wealth. And even people who aren't in a wealthy position will say stuff like this because they don't know any better. They don't have a very good opinion about things because they've not thought about it very much, and say things as basic as, "Oh, you'll have all your stuff nicked off you in socialism," which is obviously not the case. But people believe it because they've got no other inputs from it and learnt about it from memes and fraud universities like PragerU and stuff. But ultimately, a lot of the need to lie about it comes from fascists. It comes from the far right actively spreading lies about these groups to try and alienate people from them, and thus have an easier time winning over more people to normalizing fascism. So yeah, lie about socialists is absolutely correct. They do lie about socialists and the far left. But anyway, Yuri says, Yuri Albuquerque says they lie about everything, but sure as hell we must be trusted when it comes to socialism. Am I right? So yeah, there's that, which is obviously true. And then Kanye West's Haitian friend says, to say a whole group lies about everything is kind of ridiculous for any group. There's truth in everything. I mean, what do you even say to that? It's just a sentence, really, isn't it? Fascists, as we've already seen, they don't have interest in truth as long as it, pushes their narrative. And, sometimes they will tell the truth, but it will be distorted and presented in such a way that the truth is, squeezed into such a minute little group. It's not a real thing anymore. But ultimately fascists can't be trusted. If you're going to trust people like that, you can't have that. And then this Euro person's done a good job, saying to agree with a group that's famous for just lying about whatever they can to push their agenda just because they target a group you disagree with is much, much more stupid. So sans the ableist word at the end, yeah, it's a good post. It essentially says, you can't be trusting um, the fascist rhetoric. Um, and this person is confused between the right and the far right. And whilst there is a sort of blur a lot of the time between the two, um, there obviously is a difference. The right-wing people, they may have some pretty backwards views, but they aren't, quite on the far right. They're not actively seeing society in the same way they do, and subsequently can't be, seen as the same as fascists. What is the rest of this? Okay, so someone said this. So he says, "Well, there's an idea pushed around that anyone who's on the right, on either side of the spectrum, is on some extreme, when that's really not that case." Uh, I mean, I can't. I guess they mean. I'm not really sure what they're trying to say. To be honest, it's not a very well worded post. But I can only assume they mean that anyone that's a bit right wing is often called far right, and again, that's not the case. People who are called far right are, 99% of the time far right. Um, it's only the perspective they give. The far right saying, "Oh, you just call anyone a Nazi." Um, the people that say that, you know, always turn out to be quite far right themselves. People who are called far right are justifiably called that because they're saying things and doing things which are directly linked to fascism. Um, you know, and yeah, if someone says, "Oh, the stuff you're saying is quite fascist," then instead of throwing a tantrum because you've been compared to a fascist, think about what you're saying and think, "Oh, maybe what I'm saying is found and linked to far right ideas. Maybe I'm actually contributing to a culture of far right ideas by supporting these views." You know, Politics is not for children and for babies, and you got to think about it. Um, you know, more than just, "Oh, well, I'm not this, so I'm not doing anything wrong." And then the conversation continues. Um, there are definitely some fine people in that crowd. That's just ridiculous. How can you be a fine person and stand alongside the far right? What kind of person are you if you're doing that? Someone who's going to stand by fascists and Nazis and say they're fine people? Ridiculous. And just because one, they aren't all violent. The idea is violent. The ideas of fascism are inherently violent. Suppression of the workers, suppression of the marginalized, using ideas of racism and sexism and homophobia to suppress and supplant your ideas of social order onto society. That's incredibly violent. Um, so no, it's ridiculous. Um, so let's keep going. Oh gosh, just coughed then. Um, so yeah, it's more of just people trying to say to him, "Oh, or you can't be seeing the far right as a problem." Sorry, as full of good people. Um, and he says innocent until proven guilty. If someone is, advocating and saying far right ideas, and dog whistles, like, ideas of racism, like race realism, like, oh, immigrants are the scum of the earth, trying to redress queer and LGBT and, women's rights and stuff, and use dog whistles for actively play to white nationalists' ideas of society, then absolutely they're far right. They're people who have to be taken with a side eye because what's the consequence if we don't act now? The far right are in positions of political power, like they sort of are now. When it's too late, you could. It's all about saying, "Oh well, now we can act 'cause they've done stuff." But how many people are going to be dead before that's the case? We can't act within a system that is actively set up to, court the far right, which actively plays upon the decay of capitalism into fascism to, make people's lives better. Sadly, so no, it's not innocent until proven guilty. It's, we need to defend ourselves against the far right, because if we don't, we're going to be in a really dire position. There's people who are dead, literally from fascist violence right now, who could have been saved had we acted sooner. And then, there's a great image here about how tolerance is not a great thing if it's tolerating Nazis, and how it's a paradox and stuff ultimately. There are 12 more replies. I believe it's just the same stuff probably. This as well. No one accepts Nazis and fascists as it was in the days of Hitler's prime. What is this argument? Um, you know, Nazis, just because they're not literally the same people and the same exact Germans who were doing it back in the 1930s, what does that even mean? People change, but the idea stays the same. The ideas of fascism, ultra capitalism, nationalism, suppression of the workers, eradication of the minorities and stuff, removal of queer and non-white people and stuff, adhering to old traditional gender roles. All these ideas about society are still found in the far right today, just because they're not exactly the same as Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels and stuff. Doesn't mean they're not Nazis and not far right. These arguments are ludicrous and are again only designed to help the far right. Whether this person admits it or not, all they're doing is making it easier for fascists to hide themselves in society and to explain and spread their ideas. It's foolish to have this opinion. Um, and what else is there? Um, you know, I think that's the end of that. I'll move on. The far right doesn't lie about a thing. I know from experience. Cold and Nofa, just not like, is this a troll? Is this a real person? With a sentence like this, you could imagine it's either one, to be honest. But obviously, if they are far right, they're not obviously not going to be like, oh yeah, we're blatant liars, are they? Like, I suspect they may have been sarcastic though. But just in case, I'll like these two. What's next? Okay, my 2 cents says, if you're far right, you have an agenda and shouldn't be taken at face value. If you're far left, you have an agenda and shouldn't be taken at face value. If you have an honest perspective, you can be left or right. But if you're far either side, it's an agenda. So, once again, so typical like centrism of politics, where it's like, oh, well, we can't be too much either side. We've got to be in the middle, which again only plays to um, right wing and far right opinions because they are the norm. They're the people um, who have control, and subsequently, their system is accepted as the supposed center. When in reality, it's right wing. Capitalism is a right wing system, and thus, if you're going to advocate for something in the middle, which still uses capitalism, ultimately you're still using a right wing system. So yeah, it's just more of a tedious, like, oh, well, it's both sides of the same, which I've already gone over. Anyhow, this person is a good response. Everyone has an agenda. Centrism is a preservation of the status quo, which is far from apolitical. It's an explicit agenda, which is absolutely right. If you're gonna sit and say, "Oh, we should keep things the same, not too much either way," all you're doing is maintaining the social order. Like, if you, for instance, look at never mind blank there. Look at something like slavery. If you're going to sit and say both sides have the same opinion or both sides have good point and we should be in the middle, all you're doing is siding with slavery because you're maintaining that slavery. If you're going to say that, oh, Martin Luther King has good points, but then so do the people in government who don't want civil rights, that's only helping people who are the oppressors, because you're saying that the liberation of black people is the same as maintaining the segregation and stuff. And it's the same thing today. If you're going to say, oh, well, fascists and anti-fascists are the same thing, the communists and the fascists are the same thing, all you're doing is helping fascists because they're the people who have the system that's playing to their needs and have the impetus to further kind of commodification of society and further capitalism to their own whims. It's silly. And subsequently, when people like Mike Mattei real official. Is Mike Matei a famous person? I don't know. But anyway, when someone says, how is centrism the preservation of the status quo exactly? It's like they can't see that their political opinions are as naive as to think that just being smack in the middle is somehow some sort of nuance, when in reality it's just accepting the status quo. That's it. Anyhow, Duncan Jackson says, goes both ways. I have no problem. Okay, gosh, it's a Muslim one. Goes both ways. I have no problem with Muslims, but Islam is not a peaceful religion. I don't get mad at people for an idea, but I can disagree with certain aspects and morals dealing with religion. Besides, I can't think of a more anti-LGBTQ religion. I did a thread on this the other day, actually, about how Muslims are actively trying to fight for change, and that is more complicated than just Islam is bad, when it's more the power structures and the systems around it which are the problem. But this doesn't do anything to change the fact that the far right today, right now, are actively spreading lies about Muslims and about all the other groups I mentioned in that, the tweet at the top. If you see a video and the title is, Muslims destroying a car in Birmingham, and it turns out it's football fans destroying a car after they lost the derby in Switzerland, then that's actively a far-right lying, and there's no both ways about it. And you can't be accepting fascist rhetoric about Muslims, because all you're doing is just buying into ideas which actively push the far-right cause. And if you're not willing to have a nuanced conversation about this and realize that, it's not just, Muslims are the problem, and, Islam is the problem, but the systemic problem of fundamentalism within religion and the capitalism maintaining these institutions, what good is, talk of this, like, just blaming Islam for stuff, just blindly sort of buying into this, this one group is a problem, when actually problems with religion and fundamentalism and institutions are everywhere. So no, it's quite a naive view, really, and one that doesn't really help anything. On to the next one. Nick Christie, let me give you the abridged version. The far right lie. Simple as, really. Yeah, the far right aren't trustworthy actors. Brandon M says, pay attention on 6/11. All the lies are coming crashing down. Just not the ones you're brainwashed into tweeting over. I have no clue what that means. Russian bot troll. I mean, 6/11 is probably the 11th of June, because I guess they're American. They don't have the same date format as Brits. But yeah, I don't get this at all. Who knows what lies? Who knows what they're on about? Anyway, Kari Trista says, lies create fear and rage and anger, confusion. No peace. Time to block their hate, fear, and lies. And yeah, it's, if you don't want to do anything else, if you can't do anything else, then a good way to start is just blocking them out from your feed, stopping your followers and your audience and people who know you and stuff from being exposed to harmful rubbish. Because ultimately, if nothing else, the far right want you thinking about their ideas, and even if you're unwittingly, even if you don't believe it, you're unwittingly carrying it. It's like people who carry an illness, like a cold, but who are immune to it. Maybe they won't get the worst of the symptoms, but if they cough on like a bus or something, they're spreading those, infective agents, the bacteria, to other people who will then feel worse. They don't have to necessarily be believing it, but they're spreading it to their audience. So often blocking these people out completely is the best course. And if you don't feel as though you can tackle and adequately combat these things, then no, you should be, cutting them out and blocking them and stuff. So yeah, Azure, I think, says, knowing that statistically a bunch of people are taking this at face value hurts my heart. And yeah, no, it is dangerous and harmful and saddening that we see people just believing fascist lies about stuff. Seeing people actively hate their fellow, men and women and non-binaries and stuff. Just because far right groups say so. It's sad. Imagine if you're a Muslim and you wake up to people on Facebook saying things like, "Oh, why are you Muslims smashing up our country?" People have been born here and lived here their whole life, and are just as much part of the community as other people, having lives spread around them like this. And yeah, that's ultimately what fascism is. It's a deeply saddening, unpleasant movement and ideology. And that's ultimately one of the many reasons the Father was so actively vocal about it, because we want people to be happy. And one such happiness comes from the opposition to the unfair oppression and bigotry and threat of these people. So yeah, I know it is sad. NGT Ninja J Twiggy says, I what I guess that's I know what he's saying. This is a bit unintelligible. I know what he's saying, but I can't trust him on face value. What is his definition of far right? So for me, and what far right is a combination of multiple different axes of societal beliefs, but ultimately it's about capitalism taken to the extreme, and thus the social order that sees the capitalist oppress the worker ramped up to maintain and protect the capital and private property of the wealthy without any limits and barriers precedingly seen under other stuff. So, for instance, you look at a fascist compared to a capitalist, and whilst the capitalist maintains a pretense of fairness, the fascist does not care. The fascist says to the worker, "You will be my profit maker, otherwise I will imprison you and I will suppress you. You will lose your right to strike. You will, you have no, not you will. You have lost your right to strike. You aren't going to protest the conditions, otherwise we'll put you in a prison, and you'll be on nothing doing the same stuff." It's where you view minorities as a tool to making profit, where you look at black people and immigrants and people of other ethnicities and say, "Oh, well, you are less than human. I will deem you worthy of making profit for me, even more so than the rest of the populace." Hence the mass incarceration of people in America of mainly a black disposition. Hence the systemic poverty and lack of funding for black or predominantly black areas in many parts of America, sustaining the segregation we've seen today, which is only being ramped up under the Trump administration. It's the increasing police militarism and military imperialism that is designed to suppress workers and essentially block out any chance of change coming. It's protection of the capitalists from the workers. It's like protection for the capitalists from the workers, um, protecting their capital when capitalism can't do that enough by itself. So, when these far right actors look at people, on different parts of society, like Muslims, like black people, like feminists, and see them threatening the social order, they, take them and try and lie about them. Hence, oh, Muslims are destroying the West. Hence, the socialists killed all these people. All these potential threats to the social order and the private property and the capital serve as things to lie about to ultimately protect their position in society. I believe I'm coming to the end, and we're nearly done. Especially I think we've been over a few of the responses of more than once because saying the same things. But yeah, no, it's hopefully been some decent stuff here for people to reflect on. Raining in Hell says lie about socialists. Already been over this. Socialists are the direct enemies of the far right because they are ultimately people who are going to stand up against them, say no, we won't stand for the oppression and the barbarism you pose to marginalized people and workers and stuff, and we're not going to stand for it. We'll literally fight you in the streets, unlike the rest of society, unlike the liberals and the conservatives and the apolitical people who are just sort of sitting by letting fascism reign. And thus they need to lie about socialists to win over the average layman, because lots of people are gonna buy into this stuff. So yeah, they absolutely do lie about socialists. Someone's now linked a Tommy Robinson video, which why you'd link him into this sort of thing? Just this man who actively goes around like trying to smear Muslims and stuff. This man who, doesn't have any interest in the, situation that workers of the world are facing, who, if he really wanted to promote change, would be fighting against the, systems of capitalism and stuff, and systems of suppression of Muslims and, people in general by institutions, rather than just blaming Muslims in general. So no, get Tommy Robinson, just naff off. Freaky.ashes says, funny how the right are always able to tell who's Muslim and who's not just by looking at them. I can always spot a trans woman all over again. Yeah, absolutely true. Muslims, like these people who just blame Muslims and stuff, often can't tell who a Muslim is and don't know anything about Muslims in general. They can't tell the difference between Muslims and Sikhs, which is why when hostility towards Muslims increases, often Sikhs and Hindus get attacked lots as well, because funnily enough, lots of these people just hate people who aren't white and just target people who look Middle Eastern and from the subcontinent and stuff. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Muslims aren't often even the real target. It's just brown people, and Muslims are a way of dog whistling them. These people often believe the same things as the religious fundamentalists they claim to hate. It's just that the ones they hate are brown, and thus it's easier to portray them as a problem. And as for I can spot a trans woman, yeah, obviously that's just transphobic rubbish. And yeah, it's nonsense. Then in the replies, Ooga Babooga says, you can spot a trans woman, and yeah, they're just blatantly being transphobic, aren't they? Not very nice. And yeah, Osnan Sweemy says, think back for a moment. If you encountered a trans woman and you couldn't tell, you wouldn't know about it. Just because you have seen some trans women you could identify, that doesn't mean you have also seen others and not known, which is, sort of true. But frankly, this sort of, transphobic nonsense should just be like, shut down, mocked, or ignored, really, or shouted down, because it shouldn't be happening. Trans women are women, and subsequently, this person is just being a bigot. Nearly at the end now, though. Matty says, unblocked. Anything substantive here? Yeah, just explaining the situation. Nothing there. And then this person says, okay, so A7 for glove fact, but I didn't watch the video for a second time. That's awesome. Now for some legit news, the far right is a minuscule asinine fringe group that conservatives pay zero attention to because they're grossly irrelevant. Now, I wish this was true. I wish fascism wasn't an issue, but we live in times with a rising far right movement, a rising fascist movement, from Trump in the US to the far right infiltration of the Conservative Party in the UK to many far right parties in Central Europe getting ascendancy, to the shifting of the Overton window to the far right for many liberals and conservatives, and many far ideas being normalized. Look at the rhetoric around immigrants. Look at what's happening to immigrants across the West, where they're being seen as an invading force and being deported, often without fair trial. Look at the terrible plight of the worker in the capitalist West, where their progress in society has been massively stagnated by a system that only cares about milking profits out of them and taking the value of their labor for themselves. Look at the threats facing queer people and women's rights, all from this far right group that are infiltrating political systems and using the decay of capitalism to rise into fascism. So to describe it as a minuscule group is so ignorant and so naive, and it just demonstrates the complete lack of awareness that too many people have, really. And when we describe the far right as lying about stuff, this video that I was describing in the original post, it was seen by loads of people across social media. Look at how much Muslims are focused on by not just the press, but by people in social media and people just in general thinking negatively of them over mischiefs and lies and outright faked videos and stuff. So no, the far right is not minuscule, it's an active threat. And to say to people, who are often fearing for their life because of these groups that, oh, you're just overreacting to a grossly irrelevant group, is insulting, really. And I'd imagine The response, yeah, here we go. Trump is friends with Alex Jones and just pardoned Dinesh D'Souza. Are those people not far right? Which is absolutely true. Trump, who is far right, is friends with far right people and actively courting and supporting far right people. So no, it's just rubbish. Hopefully, at the end, Chris says, "Pretty sure this account isn't far right. It's just irony." Yeah, I didn't say otherwise. I'm responding to you with video and stuff. And then this person, another Russian, I guess, it's almost like you should doubt everyone and refuse to take them at face value. Not everyone, just the far right. Far left people aren't actively trying to smear groups in society. But political movements, yeah, you've got to be thinking about them. You've got to be thinking about what fascism entails and why they'd be saying stuff to push their narrative. You know, um, So, it's not like it's, oh, don't trust anyone. It's not the X-Files. But at the same time, you got to be using your head. You got to be, analyzing the situation and realizing, oh, are the fascists trustworthy for opinions about people they actually actively want removed from society? Cal says, not only do Facebook and Twitter not seem to care, but I'm thinking fake news is their business model now. Absolutely. These websites are capitalist websites, ultimately. They're businesses and they want money. So they need people constantly clicking and, viewing the adverts and generating traffic on their website because it makes them money. It is their capital. And subsequently, no matter how inflammatory and fake a lot of the stories are, there's money for them. They don't care if it's not true. They just want, the attention. And subsequently, this harms people who are the targets of fascism. But it doesn't matter to the corporation because they're using fascism to make money. And obviously, the fascists are happy because they're getting their narrative spread on major platforms. So it shows that capitalism and fascism go hand in hand, and capitalists actively use fascism to make themselves money, especially in today's age with greater social movement and stuff. Protic Islam Jakobson says, in 2018, it's not alive, you're thick enough to believe it. Not a massive fan of the ableism or some of the words here, but, I think it's also important to say the propaganda didn't start this year. It's not like it's just since Trump's taken over and since, politics have been a bit more swingy and stuff, that lies were a thing. We've got to realize that politics has always had these elements in it, just that it's not always been as blatant. Fascism is capitalism in decay, and ultimately we're always going to see more during times of capitalist insecurity, because that's when capitalists start realizing, oh well, we can't make profit as much, can't extract as much profit, and there's potential for worker uprising and unhappiness with the system. So yeah, we've got to turn to a more extreme version of capitalism or fascism. Christian says, or Armley even says, far anything is a political no-go zone. Yeah, no, already been over this. There's not a comparison between the far left and the far right. It's not the same thing. So no. Pokranik says immigrants are cool. I can't agree with that. Family are immigrants. Pretty much everyone's are. Though granted, we shouldn't really have borders, and we shouldn't really have nation states and stuff, and shouldn't be dividing ourselves as much. But yeah, immigrants are cool. Jackson says pretty much every far lies to suit their agenda. To be fair, to win an argument, you have to use truth to get someone to believe your agenda. Lying is disingenuous. That's, what do you even say to something like this? Everyone technically has an agenda. It's just people use lies to further them, whereas some agendas actually have substance to them and have truth to them and stuff. So to again compare both far ends of the spectrum as the same is silly. Again, same thing as like half applies here. Rick Boucher says, problem is that while the far right lies, the mainstream left does as well, but only one is taken seriously. Now, when they say mainstream left, I'm assuming they mean like Democrats or, CNN or something, and that can't be described as the left. They're firmly capitalist, they firmly believe in the social hierarchy we have today. It's just that, they're liberal and they're a little bit, less in tune with the conservatives. So no, this isn't accurate. It is sad to see people accurately critique like CNN and stuff, but then call it the left because if they aren't left wing, they're liberal. You know, but at the same time, it's not surprising in a country like America where the capitalist system is so good at pretending you've got a choice, but really you've got two options of like capitalism and just milquetoast capitalism and stuff. And not even that. Anyway, Almir Dedic says 100% right. No one should take anything at face value. You have a brain, use it. Left, right, doesn't matter. Well, 100%, is not left, right, that doesn't matter. It's, a specific criticism of the far right here. So no, this isn't exactly correct. Barnabas Seaworth says, I have a few questions. Question 1, if a woman said she was raped by a Muslim, are we supposed to call her a lying racist? Where's this coming from? The fact that the immediate, Muslims are mentioned and then someone says, oh, if they're raped, to tell you the sort of nature of a lot of these people. And these people as well, they only mention rape and they only care about rape when it comes down to Muslims or brown people and stuff. When it's feminists talking about elements of sexual assault and rape and stuff, they don't care. It's only when they can use it to weaponize against brown people and portray black people and stuff as animals that they actually care about this sort of thing. So no, it's a disingenuous question. And if a woman says that she was raped by someone who happens to be a Muslim, yeah, absolutely, we believe her. We do the right thing and make sure that we're investigating that sort of thing. But these people don't have any interest in that woman. They're interested in the Muslim being prosecuted and just getting rid of Muslims in general, which is fairly obvious because the question is clearly centered around the Muslim rather than just trying to abate rape culture and stuff. 2, why is addressing immigrants who enter the country illegally is considered to be a bad thing? Again, I never mentioned illegal immigrants. I just said they tell lies about immigrants. But why do people care about illegal immigrants? Why do people care about immigrants? They if people can't explain without saying, oh, because it's illegal, why someone moving to another country is bad. Yeah, fine, they weren't documented. So what? The law is not the same as justice. And if you're going to say another human being is less worthy of being somewhere simply because of an imaginary line in the ground, what kind of person are you? What kind of person actively wants people to have a worse life just because they didn't have the right paperwork? It's silly. There's no need to divide ourselves between that. So yeah, again, it's another rubbish question. And then 3, what did they say about the LGBT? That's just, what kind of question is that? The LGBT. Well, fascists have always lied about queer people. The number of mischiefs and propaganda campaigns against them, is silly. So, for instance, making up sexuality. So, people have expressed themselves in many ways, and then fascists in response to that will say, "Oh, well, there's this thing called like pedosexuals. They're trying to infiltrate your kids and stuff." And it's a complete lie. It's completely made up. It's not a real thing. It's spread by people on the far right to try and smear LGBTQ people, but people buy into it, and subsequently, think that queer people are the problem. Look at the harassment that LGBTQ people face online when they're just trying to educate people and try and make safe spaces for queer people, and then get harassed for it and by them and stuff. Ridiculous. Look at the horrible treatment of queer people in the West by fascists, by right-wing governments. Look at how long it's taken to have basic rights established in the West, and only to see them be tried to be eroded by fascists today. It's not good. So for this person to have all these disingenuous, obviously dog-whistling questions is just gross. Someone in the chat, 40 ounces, says fascism and Nazism are different things. Well, wouldn't quite say the same thing. Nazism is fascist. Whilst all fascists are not Nazis, all Nazis are fascists. So, They both have fundamentally very similar things, and absolutely, you can describe Nazism as a form of fascism. Anyhow, flipping it, there's more to Barnabas's rambling. Question 4. Why should we need to be a feminist in order to respect women? Okay, so this further demonstrates that question 1 is completely disingenuous. They only care about rape and rape culture and dismissing victims and stuff to have a go at Muslims. We're not interested in the actual women who are getting raped and stuff. It's all to do with just blaming Muslims. Feminism is obviously about the liberation of women from oppressive structures, just as capitalism is the oppression of workers in the same vein. And that's all it is, just the removal of these oppressive systems. Question 5. Are you aware that it was the Democrats who enacted the Jim Crow laws? I don't get why this is even a question, to be honest. For one, I've never actually said I'm a Democrat. I'm not Democrat. Democrats are a right-wing party. For two, political parties, they change, and there's clearly been a shift. The only reason people mention this is to try and smear the political groups as silly, and try and show them to be bad today when it's clearly been changed. It's another disingenuous question, and again, they don't care about people. They don't care about racism. They only care about smearing who they think is the left. It's nonsense. To answer another question in the chat, people are saying a 40 answer says no, it's a form of socialism, and the means of destruction says National Socialism, and that ignores the fact that Hitler was a blatant liar and propagandist who used the word socialism as a buzzword. So, for one, he corrupted the term to make it mean liberation of the German people rather than liberation of the workers. 2, he imprisoned socialists and communists. 3, he had nothing to do with worker ownership of means of production, and instead actually privatized the German economy and gave more power and consolidation of capital to the capitalists. 4, business owners, capitalists, landowners, some of the wealthiest capitalists of the time, like Henry Ford, loved Hitler and endorsed his regime. And actually, Hitler was seen as a good thing by many wealthy bureaucrats in Europe at the time because of his free market policies. 5, to describe, to essentially buy into Nazi propaganda about the party is a bit silly, to be honest, when, in reality, politics is more than just buzzwords. Again, Kim Jong-un's country is called a democracy. Is it a democracy? No. It's silly to just take the word of dictators and the word of dictatorial parties over actual political analysis. Anyway, back to this. 6, what about socialists? Same thing as what I've already said. Socialists are the enemies of fascists, so we lie about them. Only 2 left now. Boy says, remember, this is the far right, which is just as bad as the far left. Not everyone on the right hates everyone that isn't white, straight, Christian, not an immigrant, a feminist. In fact, little of us hate any of the ones listed here. It's just like, what does this have to do with anything that I said? I didn't mention the right, and it's projection if you're just going to come here and say all this rubbish that I've not even mentioned. I don't even know who you are, and then you're like, oh, not everyone hates them. It's just immediate, like, instead of addressing problems, it's just assuming that they're in the spotlight, when really they're only in the spotlight if they're going to come out and defend the far right or say things which contribute to far right ideas. It's silly. And yet again, the false comparison between the far right and the far left, just unhelpful, untrue, false lies. And like Johnny American says, one eyebrow raised. And finally, to end us off, Mike says, Owen, get a job. the typical response to anyone who's not capitalist and far left on the internet, it's just, what does that even mean? It doesn't even address anything. It's just attempting to insult. It's not even true, and can be subsequently glossed over. So there we go. That's the analysis of the replies to the tweet. Apologies if it sort of deteriorated a bit towards the end. I've been a bit, obviously a bit tired. So sadly, a few of the words were a little bit slurred. And obviously speaking like unedited and uninterrupted for an hour and a half, I think it's gonna, it's not always gonna flow as smoothly as it perhaps could do. But I'm pleased with it. It's been a nice little analysis, and hopefully I've covered some of the topics that I wanted to, explore, and I wanted to help people realize that, there's more to politics than just a center, lagoon and just the rest being bad. There's a real problem with the far right, and we shouldn't be accepting their rhetoric about it. And we should be always questioning and thinking about the way we conduct ourselves in society. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening and watching, because it's been great. I want to do more streams like this, and I want to do more debates and stuff. So if you are interested in conversing with me over stuff, just send me a message, leave me a comment or whatever. I'm always open for them. And yeah, I'll see you all next time. And thank you for listening.